Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, the Lakers eliminated last night. Dame Lillard eliminated last night. Sixers versus Hawks this Sunday, 1 p.m. here on 97.3 ESPN. And joining me right now on the Boardwalk kind of hotline, the man, the myth, the legend, NBA insider Brandon Scoop B Robinson, working with Bally Sports. Follow him at Scoop B on Twitter and Instagram. My friend Brandon, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. How you been?
I'm doing pretty good. You know, the NBA playoffs are hot and heavy underway, so you can't complain when that's going on. At least we feel some sort of normalcy in our world with the playoffs going on. But what's not normal, I got to talk to you about, is LeBron James eliminated in the first round. The first time he's been eliminated in his own conference since him and Shaq were playing on the Cavs together. It's been a really long time. So I got to get your thoughts. What is the deal with this Lakers team?
LeBron James, in fact, 14-1 in first round action. The Lakers knocked out by the Phoenix Suns. Devin Booker was amazing, first and foremost, 47 points in the contest, and really and truly, I think as much as we're dissecting LeBron James and the Lakers being eliminated, you have to give credit to the Phoenix Suns because they played good basketball, and I think Game 1 set the tone from the jump. Chris Paul coming to the Suns, a team that, you know, as I shared with you, we had interest in Chris Paul as well as the Sixers and some other teams, but ultimately it came down to in the playoffs, good coaching by Monty Williams, arguably Coach of the Year. Chris Paul was talked about in MVP conversations, but when you talk about the Lakers, genuinely, Josh, I think it started from the shortened season this year. You know, you 72-game season, short window after the bubble championship, and different personnel. I mean, I think when you look at the Lakers roster and those who aren't there anymore, Dwight Howard, Rajon Rondo are still in the playoff picture. You replace them with the likes of Wesley Matthews, Montrezl Harrell, and Dennis Schroeder. And you're seeing why sometimes you have to overpay for talent. I'll continue to say that because when you overpay, you know the results you're getting. I like Wesley Matthews. I like Dennis Schroeder. I like Marc Gasol, but also JaVale McGee was out of the picture. So you transformed from a defensive-minded, fast break team to a team that plays in a half-court set a lot, and you're depending heavily on Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Kyle Kuzma as your supporting cast to LeBron James and Anthony Davis, who, oh, by the way, have been hurt off and on throughout the course of the season. So it's a lot to dissect there, and we don't have the amount of time in the segment needed to adequately, put out there what needed to have been different.
Well, with that being said, then, which roster do you think gets the most turnover this offseason? The Lakers or the Blazers?
The Lakers. Story that I put out today will explain a lot. The Lakers, one of the key names that the Lakers will be looking at this offseason is one in Kelly Oubre, currently an unrestricted free agent, Golden State Warriors. He will command anywhere from 20 to 30 million. So in order to make that happen, there'll have to be some sign and trades on the docket in that regard. He's one of many players that the Lakers will be looking at. And then, you have a ton of unrestricted free agents this summer. Jared Dudley, as well as Alex Caruso. And then I know that Montrezl Harrell has a player option, and I know that Kostas Antetokounmpo is another guy that's a free agent. So there's a lot that they're going to have to figure out in the offseason. Ben McLemore, all those different pieces, and you're going to have to add on to Anthony Davis and LeBron James. So Kelly Oubre will be a name that will be paid attention to. You can check out my column at BallySports.com. But in addition to that, when you do look at, I want to address the Blazers. The Blazers are going to have to analyze how they can make a deal for Kevin Love happen. And I know that Kevin wants out of Cleveland, but it has to be the right fit and it has to be mutually beneficial for both teams. I don't know if the buyout is a realistic opportunity for him to find greener pastures as a role player to Damian Lillard. I know that he's done interviews recently that have intimated that he'd like to be teammates with Damian Lillard, but ultimately it comes down to a viable star that plays alongside Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard brings the main course to dinner every night, but you got to have somebody who's holding their end of the bargain with dessert, mimosas, appetizers, hot chocolate and coffee. He just can't be bringing the main course and people getting full and falling asleep and going home. Portland needs help.
Absolutely. Brandon Scoop B. Robinson, NBA insider, joining us here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN at Scoop B on Twitter and Instagram for the full Scoop B experience. Let's jump back over to the East. Obviously, the Sixers, they get to the second round, but Embiid. Sixers keep saying he's day to day, but we've had an orthopedic surgeon tell us here at 97.3 that the injury is a 2 to 4 week injury based on the description. So what is your expectation for a Sixers team without Embiid going against this budding superstar known as Trae Young, who is just scorching across the sky like just a blaze of light?
Yeah, well, a 2 to 4 week window that has been discussed from medical experts that I've spoken to. They've said the same thing. But ultimately, it comes down to comfortability and fit. I say that to say we saw last night how Anthony Davis, completely different injury than Joel Embiid, but tried to rush back and be, an asset to that team. And, the Sixers are in a very different position than the Lakers at this point. But I think the good insurance policy that the Sixers do have, however, is that Dwight Howard is the insurance policy needed for his absence, his brief absence. And if I can make a comparison, you looked at the Lakers roster last year, and there were points where Anthony Davis was out, and Dwight Howard did more than hold his end of the bargain in his absence. Ultimately, it kind of is disappointing because, Dwight wanted to re-sign with the Lakers, and he wanted more playing or wanted a little bit more money, and he wanted to close games. And ultimately, that's what he got in Philadelphia. And little did he know that he'd essentially be doing some of the same things in Philly that he did in LA last season. So to go to what I'm saying about Dwight Howard, I think he can help spell them in critical moments right now with Embiid being out. But I'll also add that it's been such a collaborative effort within guys not named Embiid that I think that a team like the Atlanta Hawks, you can kind of balance that weight, if you will. The only reservation that I have is Embiid is one of the league leaders defensively. And John Collins, as well as Clint Capella, are what aren't always talked about within the Hawks. I know that in basketball, the point guard, the shooting guard, the small forward is the epitome of the wide receiver and the quarterback in the NFL. And so the big man doesn't always get the looks. He's probably the offensive tackle or the defensive lineman or not even the defensive lineman, but the nose guard in comparison to the quarterback, if you will. But Trae Young is setting a lot of records. He's ringing bells like Sundays at 12 o'clock. But ultimately, defensively, the Atlanta Hawks in the regular season took care of business, and you saw it later in round one against the New York Knicks, that it's not just Trae Young that's doing what he's supposed to do. John Collins and Clint Capella have been playing good basketball, and they minimized Julius Randle's contributions in round one versus what Randle was able to do in the regular season in the 3 games that the Knicks beat the Hawks. So I say that to say big man domination is something that is a strength for the Atlanta Hawks, not just guard play. And so when you have Embiid, who gets to the line 14 to 16 times a game for Philadelphia, one may be worried that, okay, who's your go-to man? But I was impressed with what the Sixers did, particularly with not just Ben Simmons, but Tobias Harris, as well as Seth Curry in the closing game against the Washington Wizards the other night. So I think there's a lot to be dissected there, but I do think that the Sixers do have the adequate support to win games in Joel Embiid's absence in the short term.
Yeah, with that being said, the Sixers are 17-0 and Seth Curry scores at least 15 points in a game. So that tells you right there that when he has a contribution, all cylinders are clicking. With that being said, do you buy anything into the whole Dan Burke's on the Sixers staff? He used to work with Nate McMillan. There might be a little familiarity on both coaching staffs. There might be a little bit of chess going on here in this series.
Yeah, I think familiarity always, they say familiarity breeds contempt, but I think in this case, familiarity in the system definitely helps. But I do think that you said that assistant coach was an assistant, the assistant coach with the Sixers was an assistant with McMillan in Indiana.
Yeah.
I think Indiana played a different system, though. So he may know some of McMillan's coaching schemes, but ultimately, I think in the playoffs, most teams know the other team's plays anyway. So I think when it comes down to just going out and playing, I think that's what's in play here. I think the Sixers have seen tape of the Hawks and what they did against the Knicks. The Hawks have seen tape of what the Sixers did against the Wizards, and they have tape to go on by the regular season. I think ultimately it's going to come down to just putting points on the board, defensive stops, and more, and less about coaching philosophy, because even within them seeing them play each other in the regular season, by game one or game two, in a playoff series, you know what teams are running because you're looking at tape intimately. And, I remember during my childhood reporting days with the Nets when they were in New Jersey, and being in the Bulls locker room during the Last Dance Bulls era, and the Bulls playing the Nets and sitting in the locker room, and Dennis Rodman and Ron Harper and Scotty and Michael were sitting in the visitors' locker room watching Nets tape from the game before. You're familiar because you have the tape to support it. So, I think when it comes down to it, I think coaching, you kind of know coaching instincts, but ultimately I think it comes down to just, muscle memory and your memory foam, and just going out and playing.
Couple more for Scoop B. Brandon Robinson, NBA insider at Scoop B on Instagram and Twitter. Of course, he's also working with Bally Sports. Check out his work over there. Joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. One more on the Sixers. Can the Sixers beat the Hawks if Embiid cannot play this series?
Yes.
And how?
Size. I think when you look at Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris, number one, I think Tobias Harris has proven why he should have been an NBA All-Star back in February. And I think that he's carried them at points during the season, especially in game one against the Washington Wizards. And I think that when you look at the Atlanta Hawks and their defensive schemes, defensively, I'm wondering who can check Tobias Harris on the Hawks. I think he's going to be the difference maker here. Number two, I think Ben Simmons is playing good basketball, and I think size-wise, he creates so many disadvantages against the other team, and he's not depended on to be the primary ball handler and playmaker within the Sixers system. I also think that when it comes down to coaching philosophies, I think that ultimately Doc Rivers has been there before as far as deep runs in the NBA playoffs and even winning NBA Finals rings. And I think his coaching staff is going to help support that, albeit Sam Cassell and others. So I think that the Sixers are made to be a championship team. But I also think that Atlanta is no chump team, because I think that many people thought that the Knicks were just going to steamroll and walk all over the Hawks. And Trae Young is playing good basketball. So I'm curious to know if Ben Simmons will be the guy that's going to check him defensively on the regular, if it's going to be valiant switches between Shake Milton as well as Seth Curry. I think it's going to be a collaborative effort, but I think also some of the intangibles that are on the Sixers outweigh the personnel on the Hawks. So I think it's not going to just be Ben Simmons getting a triple-double every night. I think some nights you're going to see him rebounding the basketball more. I think some nights you're going to see Tobias scoring more. I think some nights you're going to see even Shake Milton, being a league or team leader and assist in the game. I think it's going to be all hands on deck, just like the last game against the Washington Wizards. And I think I think that the Hawks can compete, I think that the Sixers can compete. I also think that when you look at the big man position in the first round against the Washington Wizards, with in the last game, particularly with Embiid being out, guys like Daniel Gafford, guys like Robin Lopez, guys like even Rui Hachimura benefited from Embiid being out. But I think that, collaboratively, the smaller guys played a brand of basketball that combated big man ball on the Washington side. And I think some of those same schemes, will be a benefactor in round 2 against the Atlanta Hawks.
I saved the best for last because obviously the series that everyone is looking forward to. If you love basketball, how can you not be looking forward to Nets versus Bucks? And depending on which side of the fence you're on, this is the ultimate, but it feels like hero versus villain, right? This is Optimus Prime versus Megatron. This is Captain Marvel versus Thanos. This is Superman versus Black Adam. It is the two powerhouses of the NBA, most people consider, going head to head. I think the series is going 7 for sure. How do you view this series?
Yeah, I see it go 6 or 7 as well. 7, you're saying 6 or 7, I say. But I think when you look at this series, the Milwaukee Bucks are not what they were last year. I mean, number one, they got the monkey off their back and beating the Miami Heat in round 1 after losing to the Heat last year. They have added pieces. I think as much as folks pay attention to what is the behemoth of Giannis Antetokounmpo from Milwaukee, there are some added pieces that those who like the Nets should be a little nervous because while Chris Middleton and Giannis are the big two, former Sixer Drew Holiday has come into the fold and played great basketball for the Milwaukee Bucks. But I'll add this. Bryn Forbes is nothing to be played with. And I'll be honest with you, I like the added pieces of PJ Tucker. I like the added piece of Bobby Portis, as I call him, OG Bobby Portis. But also, I think that there's a level of mental toughness that has permeated the Milwaukee Bucks that wasn't there a year or two ago. I'll trade a second round appearance in the NBA playoffs over 2 MVP awards if I'm Giannis Antetokounmpo. But I think that the added personnel and the 5-year extension that he signed definitely frees him to just be more of the creative than being the curator, the manager, the cook, the person who's holding the venue or owning the venue. He's just allowed to be the artist and the art exhibit, and I think it's great to see. But on the other side of the basketball, the Brooklyn Nets, I think one of the things that's benefited them is the fact that they're a second seed and the fact that they had that week off during the play-in tournament to kind of get additional rest and get practice in between. When I look at the Nets, one of the things that many people think are a glaring hole is the big man position, and versus Milwaukee, who has Giannis as their starting 4 and Brook Lopez as their starting 5, versus a Nick Claxton, who the world is beginning to get more familiar with, blonde hair, but also at points during the season, a force to be reckoned with. I think that the Blake Griffin additions for Brooklyn help them. I think he's their version of Draymond Green in their system, so to speak, a vet that can be a playmaker, that can get buckets, that can shoot the J, but has a leadership quality that people respect within that locker room. I think that there are so many collision courses that can be had in games 1 through 7 if it goes 7 games. But I think ultimately this series is going to be the most difficult series for Brooklyn in comparison to if they make it to the next round and they have to play Atlanta or Philadelphia. And I think it's exactly what they need. They need some adversity after going against Boston. The most turbulence Brooklyn faced was a fan throwing a water bottle and a 1-game loss to Boston in Boston. Next series is a whole new ball game. So it's going to be a good, interesting series to watch.
He is NBA insider extraordinaire Brandon Scoop B Robinson at Scoop B on Twitter, Instagram. Check out his work over at Bally Sports. And as all guests, he appeared right here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Brandon, I appreciate you jumping on, getting our weekend started. The NBA playoffs are hot and heavy. And, of course, we'll all be following you for all the latest updates.
Brother, thank you. I hope I didn't talk your ear off.
Well, listen, if you did, it's just payback for me because I took everybody else's ear off. So there you go.
There you go. We even.